you for coming. And I get the exciting post-lunch slot, which is often where I seem to get cast in these things. So yeah, it's a little bit of that sense of how much awareness can there possibly be while the body is doing its postprandial digestion. As one of the Tibetan teachers, Sogyal Rinpoche, these lamas used to say, he'd say, like, I'm forever getting people say to me things like, Lama, does consciousness survive death? And he said, never mind that. Does consciousness survive lunchtime? So, yeah, just like a little wave every now and then so I know you're awake. or perhaps give me a nudge if it looks like I've nodded off. So I'm Keith. I'm the imposter. As the non-drama therapist, although I have worked quite extensively over the years with drama therapy alongside Gillian, and we found, kind of unsurprisingly perhaps, that there's a very good organic, natural fit between certainly the sesame type approach to drama therapy and what I do, which is largely coming out of psychosynthesis. So somewhere in this ramble that we will have, there's a little bit on psychosynthesis which may or may not be of interest to you, just to kind of put some sort of very flexible kind of map to this notion of what often gets called the transpersonal. So the title today, No Certainty, Only Adventure, is true on every level, because I have no idea what I'm going to say, or how it's going to come out, or what you'll make of it. So that's the certainty bit thrown well out the window. And it's deliberately so, because for me that's how the best learning is possible. You know, life is a conversation. It's not a series of scripts that we read to one another, hopefully, if it's going well. So feel free at any point to interrupt or ask a question. I'd rather actually that you do, as we go along, rather than kind of sit on a question for the next 45 minutes, see it. Sort of, yeah, let's see if we can work with it as we go along. There is a plan, but whether we stick to it, that's down to the adventure part of the title. And the phrase, no certainty, only adventure, that's a quote which I've basically stolen. Everyone nicks it from somewhere. It's basically stolen from Roberto Assagioli, who was the founder of psychosynthesis, an Italian guy who I've been doing a lot of research on recently and trying to write a book about, so he's kind of haunting some part of my awareness, hence trying to exercise him by stealing some of his words and using them to hang today's talk upon. So, there'll be various bits of the talk, the bit that's known, that will be to do with language, and hopefully that will become apparent as to why that's the case as we go along. So let's see if this is going to work. So yeah, I thought let's start where we are. Let's start in this place. So how many of you are from Cwmbran? One person. So don't answer. Yeah. What's in a name? What does Cwmbran mean?
Lots of roundabouts.
Yeah. 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 Okay. Well, I'm not going to labour the point. So, of course, Cwmbran is a new place, didn't exist in the way it exists today until 1949. It's one of those post-war, kind of imposed, constructed out of some town planner's head visions. But, interestingly, given all that newness, they pick a name that has some very interesting, I think, roots. So you've got Cwm, valley, as you've already said, frequently appears, and Bran, which literally means crow, or is also a name. It's the name Bran, or it's the female version Branwen, usually sometimes Bronwyn. Okay, so what? Well, you could say that Cwmbran literally means either the valley of the crow or crows, or Bran's valley, the valley belonging to or associated with Bran. Okay, so what? Who's Bran? Well, the main Bran one comes across in story and mythology is Bran the Blessed, not Brian Blessed. Bran the Blessed, who was said to be a giant, one of the original inhabitants of these lands, king of the island of the mighty. His sister's called Branwen, and it's he whose head, which was severed at a certain point in his career, It's said to be buried under the White Tower in the Tower of London, and it's that earliest association that if that head is ever dug up, then Britain will be invaded and bad things will happen. It's why there are ravens in the tower, according to some, because raven, crow, ram, there's a kind of etymological kind of little riff on that. So Bran's also, in the stories of him, which we don't have time to go into today, he's often seen as a prototype for the Fisher King, who shows up a lot in Arthurian mythology, back to our wounded healer stuff from earlier on, for those who were there. And he's also frequently seen to be a psychopomp. So does that word mean anything to psychopomp? So psyche as in psyche, as in soul, literally, Greek word for soul, and pomp as in movement. So a psychopomp is like a guide, one who takes the soul or accompanies the soul on a journey. So if you think of, say, Dante, faces, the Divine Comedy, you can't go to some of these places without a guide. You can't just knock on the door of Hades and go, hey, I'd like to come in. You're not getting in. But these thresholds have guardians, and if you're not qualified, you're really not coming in. If you're not ready, you're not coming in. Or if you're not accompanied by the right credentialed guide, basically, or psychopomp in the old language. Very frequently, psychopomps are animals as well. So the Greeks, frequently a dolphin would be a psychopomp. Maybe here it's something more like a crow or a raven. These ominous creatures that bear omens, whisper things to us. So that's something about where we are right now. Hopefully it'll become apparent why I feel that's important. Maybe not. It's got something to do with that, with being indigenous. So I'm guessing you've all heard the word indigenous. What's going on with that word? What does that mean to you?
People of the place.
Does that make sense?
Belonging.
Belonging, people of a place, anything else? I'm not looking for any particular right answer, just to see what's there.
Native.
So again, in your original place. Yeah, I think you've got brother. Very, very on track. So the etymology of the word, so you get indi, which is linked to endo, literally meaning inside or within, like a movement that goes like that. And genus, and all the words that have gen in them, basically describe a kind of something being born, something being given form, being given a shape and an experience of life, hence generated, quite literally, genetics, and so on and so forth. Even oxygen, all the gases that have gen in them, they're named for the quality that they're. So oxygen is the kind of fire giver, because you can't have flames without oxygen. Anyway, indigenous, you could say, means to be born inside here, a place called here. And fundamentally it's a place-based identity, much more than it is an identity based on human relations. Yeah? So the belonging primarily comes from being born in this place. So rootedness, or a coming up from a placeness. And I would go on to argue that because of that, indigenous is already transpersonal. It's not particularly interested in the little me, the ego, the other ways we can describe that kind of fragment of self. Fundamentally, there's something much bigger going on. And if you've ever worked with story, myth, and certainly for those who were working earlier on, this is obvious. You become a native of a place. Yeah? Okay, so a little word on indigeny. The other word that has been buzzing around today, which I think there's maybe a little bit more to add to, or play with, perhaps, is the word archetype. So I'm guessing again you've all heard the word archetype. It's turning into a grammar lesson. Trust me, we're going somewhere with this, I hope. So archetype, we heard various different sort of definitions. It's a notoriously tricksy kind of word to nail down. I'm not going to ask you to try and do that, but let's unpack it. Let's take it back to its. Well, these are the dictionary definitions actually. So if you look in a dictionary, generally what you'll find are these three definitions: a typical example of a person or a thing. He was the archetypal, centre forward, or the archetypal prime minister. It's something about being true to the form, the essential form of a thing. A collectively inherited unconscious idea, a pattern of thought, an image that is universally present in individual psyches. So that's basically the Jungian idea of an archetype, which comes out of other understandings, not the least of which is the Platonic Greek. So it's collective, it's held in the collective, but it's experienced by individuals. So that's another level. Or a constantly recurring symbol or motif in literature, painting, or mythology. So it's used in a technical sense to describe, why there are loads of fleur-de-lis being painted at a certain point, or why halos start appearing on people, or whatever it might be. So they're probably some of the definitions you've seen before or have encountered before, but we go a bit further in the unpacking. So we started using the word archetype in the English language, having nicked it from the Latin, which in turn nicked it from the Greek, in the 1540s. Yeah? And it comes from archetypum, and basically if you follow it back, it has a meaning of first moulded. This is pretty important stuff if we're thinking of being a therapist, or we're thinking of being a storyteller, someone working with words. The way we mould those things together is not insignificant. And you could take it further than only words. It might be to do with the way you hold your body, the way you do or don't meet people in terms of all the other ways we meet people, with our eyes and with our kind of awareness of space and so on. So let's go a little bit deeper. Oh, actually, yeah. Just to throw in a slide around. This is actually, anyone has a guess where I came upon this? So it's a slide describing some of the typically described human archetypes. Things like hero, sage, lover, magician, jester. Any ideas? Tarot? Yeah.
Probably somewhere really random.
Well, funnily enough, a lot of work on archetypes, if you can call it that, is done in advertising. So if you do a Google search of archetypes, as I certainly did, especially if you do an image search, you start to find things that look a bit like this, but then have another layer outside them where they put brands. So, which brand appeals to which archetype, so who are we going to aim our marketing? Which is a bit of a clue towards something here, really, because, advertising spends a fortune in terms of budget. Why? Well, because it works, because it's effective, because it shifts more units of product off the shelves. And it also has a very deep link to certainly the psychoanalytic tradition. So that's where a lot of psychologically aware early thinkers went into what you could think of as a kind of manipulation. Take that as wherever you want to place that on the scale of values, positive, negative, or somewhere in the middle. But certainly people in advertising pay a great deal of attention to archetypes and the energy of archetypes and archetypal forms. And as you can see, you start with a base archetype, you can then start to split it and refine it and bring it back. So there's a kind of alchemy going on, really, in terms of how we communicate. So let's just finish this bit about archetypes. So etymology, if you etymologize etymology, you get a speaking of true sense. That's what the word basically means. Trying to come to an understanding of the root original word that gives you a key to understand what that word actually means. Because frequently stuff comes out of our mouth, as is happening to me right now, and we don't know what we're saying. And we certainly don't understand the lineage and the attachment to that word. It changes its meaning over time, but it still carries something of that original power, I would argue. We're basically speaking a kind of magic here. We all operate within a certain kind of spell that our culture casts upon us. And its primary means of casting it upon us is what comes out of the mouths of the people who hold the culture. So if we want to dispel that and claim it for ourselves, we first have to see what's happening, and then we have to speak our own spell. So words, language, absolutely critical. I think, why does that make any difference in a dramatherapy conference? Well, because of story, because of the way story operates through lots of you and the work you do. And also hearing. You know, you've got two ears. An indigenous understanding of why you have two ears is that you have one ear, and also just morphologically, they're not the same. Your two ears, that one's slightly higher, one's slightly lower, they're slightly different shapes, really not symmetrical, if you pay them any attention. One ear is for hearing what's said, and the other ear is for hearing what's not said. Yeah? So just keep that one up your sleeve. Don't tell anyone. So the etymology of archetype. So arche means beginning or origin. Tupos means pattern or sometimes model, or you could even say type, but that's a bit redundant. And it also sometimes appears as typos, which is interesting because it means to strike. So it's a bit like relief work, you know, hammering out the shape of something in metal usually. Almost stamping something with an original form. So archetype you could understand to mean the first blow, the initiating strike, or the original impression. You know, what first landed before thought, actually, before cognition, before we got to work on that, before we even owned it. Just what landed, what made the first impression. By the way, don't believe anything I say. Really don't. No, check this out against your own experience. And yeah, if it earns its keep in your experience, then great. Use it. If it doesn't, throw it away. That's how this stuff has to work. So just to bring in Jung, because I've mentioned him already. So what did he have to say about archetypes? Well, one thing he said is that the archetype is a tendency to form representations of a motif. Representations that can vary a great deal in detail without losing their basic pattern. So he's immediately hedging his bets, isn't he, really? He's saying there's such a thing as an archetype, the way we experience it is a representation of it, not the thing itself. Yeah? So you can never directly know or experience an archetype, a bit like all those Greek stories about you can never look upon the god, because if you do, you go blind, or you get struck dumb, or you just get annihilated. It's too bright. So we're interested in working with these representations. And then a different view from another more recent thinker, a Sufi mystic and physicist, oddly, a guy called A.H. Almas, Hamid Ali, who says archetypes don't actually exist in reality. An archetype is a concept you have to remember. There are no such things as archetypes that actually exist in reality. We can experience ourselves as the mother, for example, but there is no such thing as something everyone could experience in the same way. Some people at some point are mothers, that's the reality. The archetype of the mother doesn't exist. It's an image, a concept, and crucially, it is not a presence. So I think one of the words I used in the blurb for this, probably foolishly, had something to do with radical presence. So we'll get to that, hopefully. But just to hold for now that thought that an archetype sort of haunts behind the scenes of language and pattern and experience, but it is not a presence. Mysterious. You just check where I am with this. Last thing on archetypes. So, the root of the word, arche, is the same as the English word arch. You know, we get them from the same root. But why is that in any way interesting or useful? Well, imagine yourself to be, if you can, someone who has never seen an arch. You know, maybe you've grown up way out in the sticks, way back in time, and all you've ever seen are straight doorposts with a lintel over the top. Yeah? Just two things like that, and a third thing across the top, like Stonehenge, something like that. And then you have reason to go to town, to market or something, and even to get into the town, you're faced with an arch. What do you think you're going to feel? You've never seen one of these before. Maybe you feel anything. I'd suggest you might feel terrified, Because what the hell is that, and how is it standing up? Because there's nothing, it doesn't work. You know, what is happening there? And of course, this is the magic of an arch, is that it takes two kind of feet that are planted, and it takes a keystone at the top that's been kind of properly worked out by someone with the skill to do it, to make the whole thing actually hold its form, hold its archetypal shape. So there's no accident really that root appears in that word and in our English word arch, which again stands for that threshold that we started by thinking about earlier on. Yeah? And so the arch represents, if we dare, the thing we can step through, step into with some new meaning. Okay, let me pause there for a second. Anybody want to leave?
I think that's so cute.
Had enough. Okay.
Give it 5 minutes.
So, any questions? Anything to chuck in? We're just getting going a bit here. That was the preamble. Now this is the amble. So I thought we'd try a poem at this point, because that's always a good thing to do. And the poem is a poem by the Hungarian, Austrian, German, Russian poet, Rainer Maria Rilke. A poet of soul, you might say, and certainly one who's attracted a lot of attention on that level. A poem of his, which in English is called How Surely Gravity's Laws. Well, I'll read it, but it's up there if you can see it. And just, again, see if you can hold something of an awareness as to why this might be a poem that would appear at this kind of moment. Listen with both your ears, as it were, or indeed any other part of your being. So, how surely gravity's law, strong as an ocean current, takes hold of the smallest thing and pulls it towards the heart of the world. Each thing, each stone, blossom, child, is held in place. Only we, in our arrogance, push out beyond what we belong to for some empty freedom. If we surrendered to Earth's intelligence, we could rise up rooted like trees. Instead, we entangle ourselves in knots of our own making and struggle lonely and confused. So like children, we begin again to learn from the things, because they are in God's hand. They have never left him. This is what the things teach us: to fall, patiently to trust our heaviness. Even a bird has to do that before he can fly. Does anyone any response to that? Anything it conjures for you that might or might not be sayable? No, it's the digestive process kicking in.
I felt immensely relieved by the last line.
Yeah, that even a bird has to do that before he can fly. Very countercultural and counterintuitive, this poem, I would suggest. You know, most of us are way more over that side than we are on this side with the children and the things. It's been observed that we live in a culture that's basically addicted to competence. I'm sure if you think of your work life, you might well have many examples of that. And yet, if we're truly what we claim to be in regard of working as healers, or those interested in, or where does the word healing come from? It comes from qual, the Old English word for whole, wholeness, holing. Then this is some of the stuff we're going to have to encounter. The tick box form. Did that ever make anyone laugh? Really? Yeah. Who knows?
What pleases the managers, isn't it? The accountants.
So, yeah. Is that why we're in this business? Is this even a business, or is this a way of proceeding in the world from a kind of understanding that's based on a true experience rather than a kind of concept? Who knows? As I said, I'm just the imposter. I'm a kind of Trojan horse up here, really. Now I'm here, you're going to get it. Okay, so pause here because I thought another way of encountering this from another angle is to hear it from a culture probably none of us really know anything much about at all. And I would suggest a culture that to some extent, certainly a greater extent than our own, maintains a kind of intactness. So I'm talking about the Siberian or sub-Siberian nomadic kind of tradition, often referred to in English as tuva or tuvan, the people who do the throat singing, if you've ever come across this. So I want to play you a bit of a particular track by these people. Yeah, they're over there somewhere. And this track is a lament, basically. I was talking to Austin earlier. All tuvan songs are laments, really, certainly to our ears. But this one actually is specifically a lament. And what I want you to bear in mind as you hear it, however alien it may strike you as being, this is a song, if I understand it rightly, that was composed by somebody for their dear friend who died. Yeah, so it's a coming out of grief and loss, and it's sung whenever you're riding, you're moving through the landscape, and the thought of this friend comes into your awareness. And you recover an awareness. You know, I don't know any tuvan names, so I'm going to make one up. No, I'm not. Be insulting. If only he was here now, if only she was still with me now. And you sing this song. And you sing this song not because you're feeling bad and sorry and maybe a bit missing them. Yeah, that could all be in there. You sing this song in the hope that someone else who might hear this song, and even if there isn't anyone to hear this song, the landscape and the creatures and the animate forces of the landscape hear this song and they are praised by it. They receive beauty through it. It's a kind of alchemical transformation of raw human grief and pain into something beautiful. Not in a showy display kind of way, but as an act of simple, that is what true humans do. That's what you do when you feel grief. You find a way to say and speak and utter and sing, in this case, the unsayable. And if you do, you kind of relearn how to fly like that bird. Or as another poet puts it, you reteach a thing its loveliness. You reteach a thing its loveliness. going to fade that out, and I'm going to invite you, as that fades out, just to, if you're willing, maybe to close your eyes for a moment. Doesn't matter if you don't want to close your eyes. If you do keep them open, I suggest just letting your gaze soften, as it were. So don't really look at anything, don't focus on anything, just let your eyes rest in the middle distance. And if it's comfortable to have both feet on the floor, see how that is. If not, don't worry, it's fine. We're just going to take a 3-minute, it's often called 3-minute mindfulness. Just a little break, a little moment to reflect. So I would encourage you to begin that 3 minutes by taking 2 or 3 breaths that are deeper than you would normally take. And really allow yourself to breathe out fully and completely. Breathe out through your mouth if you wish. Breathe out, as they say in some of the texts, as though you were breathing out through a tube of bamboo. And as you breathe out, feel your awareness drop a little deeper into your body. Check in with your body. How is it right now? What are you aware of physically? Perhaps there's discomfort or pain, perhaps tiredness, digestion, perhaps you're hot or cold. Just see if it's okay to include whatever's present at the level of the body. And as you do that, you may open to the level of your feelings, emotions. Take your emotional pulse right now. What's with me? And notice anywhere you might be a little stuck or attached or constrained by a feeling or an emotion. And if you find such a thing, is it possible to breathe into it, to give it a little more spaciousness, to come back to the tidal rhythm of your breathing, moving in up to the high tide mark of your breath, turning, receding and flowing out. And then perhaps your awareness may move one more time, moving up to the level of thought, of thinking, of mental events, memories, associations, the 10,000 things of the mind. See if it's possible just to both be with whatever's happening in your mind right now and with that which holds the context in which they happen. So thoughts are the content. Where are the thoughts arising? That would be the context. So if it's possible, just to subtly shift your awareness to include the context. You are not your thoughts. Your thoughts are not you. Your thoughts are thoughts. Sounds simple. So just breathing in, breathing out, being present to your own experience, your own body in this moment. And then gently bringing yourself back into the room, into relationship with your fellows. So just a little bit about presence, because basically it's a bit of a fool's game to try and say anything about presence, really. I'm happy to try, but I should preface it by saying the best I could hope to do, or anyone could hope to do, is to fail well, pointing at it. Whereas presence is actually available to you directly whenever you remember and choose to allow that possibility in. So, looking at the clock as well, perhaps we'll trust that presence is something that we can feel, that maybe you did just have a little whiff of in the breeze, and not something to labour. So let's turn our thoughts to dramatherapy, as that seems appropriate. I've heard there's a dramatherapy conference going on somewhere in this building. Maybe some of it's leaked into this room. So dramatherapy, let's just play with that word for a moment. So drama, again, as so many of our words, comes out of the Greek, and it comes from the verb dram, which basically means to do, to act, to take action. So it's active. Straight away you know that anything that's got drama in it is active. It's not a passive thing. And therapy, again, a tricksy kind of word really, but fundamentally, at its core, it's a meaning associated with waiting. Waiting upon, and waiting for. And it's definitely got inferences of healing. So in certain periods in the Greek world, the attendants in various temples dedicated to various gods would be called therapi. So it's got that kind of... And what did they do? Well, they didn't sit and talk to people particularly. They made you welcome, they fed you, they looked after your basic needs. And as you stayed in the temple and slept, you'd get up the next morning and you would go to them and tell them what dream you'd had, and they would interpret the dream for you in the context of your question or your life. So fundamentally that's at the root of this identity that we glibly trade on and charge money for in the world. Therapy, therapist, comes out of that kind of understanding. So the act of waiting upon, say serving, but also the act of attending to a person, their being, their soul. Said I wanted to say something about psychosynthesis, so this is the moment. So this is all you need to know about psychosynthesis in 2 minutes. In one diagram. That's not quite true. So most people who've heard of psychosynthesis at all have heard of something called, it's about eggs, isn't it? About an egg. So this is the famous or infamous egg diagram. And what it is basically is a map of the psyche. So Roberto Assagioli's insight and the thing he formulated basically is held and summed up in large measure by this map. So first of all, it's a map, it's a model, it's a lie. Any map, any model, it's a lie. It's a simplification of reality. That's what it is, fundamentally. So you then get into a question of, well, is it a useful illusion or description or simplification? And I would suggest quite a lot of the time this one is useful, but don't believe anything else. So it's like, imagine you were going on holiday to Paris and somebody, trying to be helpful, gave you a map of Glasgow. So what do? You go to Paris and you believe this map is a map of Paris, so you walk around and go, well, that must be the River Seine, yeah? And you try and fit actual, real Paris into map version of Glasgow, or whichever city I just picked. Or do you just throw the map away and be in Paris? So that's what I mean by an illusion or a lie. If it was a map of Paris and you're in Paris, okay, that could be really useful. But you'd still want to kind of look up from the map. Eat a croissant. Or drink some wine. So take it on that kind of level. So the egg diagram describes the invisible parts of the human being. Basically your psyche, your mind, these different aspects. And I'm not sure if you can see this because of the sunshine, but what you've got is an egg, an ovoid shape with 3 levels. So who says there are 3 levels? There might be 12, there might be 100. There are at least 3 levels, let's say that. And very neatly, they're described as the lower unconscious, the middle unconscious, and the higher unconscious. Okay? So this is a kind of structure, an architecture of the inner being, the inner life. Then, everything around the outside of the egg could be related to as other. Yeah? So everything inside the shell, that's me. Everything outside, it's the world or the collective or whatever label we want to put upon it, but fundamentally, not me, different than me. Thank you very much. At the centre, you can see there that the dot, that's usually referred to in psychosynthesis terms as the I, or sometimes the self with a small s. Sort of a bit like Freud's idea of ego, but Freud never really did call it ego, did he? He called it das Ich. And it's more like that. It's a verb. It's a process-driven thing. You are eyeing yourself into being in every moment. It's not a fixed entity, but it does represent a fixed point on this map. So around it, we have this kind of circular thing here, and I would say that's way too neat. Actually, you should imagine it kind of like an amoeba, kind of doing all this stuff. Because that is basically referred to in most systems as the field of awareness. It's that which describes where your awareness has gone. So if, we heard a massive loud bang outside, all of us would be immediately drawn to that because our field of awareness has been triggered through our bodies and our nervous systems and everything else to do so. But fundamentally the idea here is that from this place, the I, it's possible, this is the theory, to begin to direct our awareness. So rather than our awareness being pushed and pulled and kicked and seduced and nudged all over the place, fundamentally we have the capacity to choose where we put that awareness. Or that the awareness goes where it's going via the I. So there's a moment in any process or reactive chain of events where I could choose to do something differently. So we can interrupt archetypal patterns or habits or so on and so forth. So the metaphor that's frequently used for that is, actually I haven't got to that bit yet, have I? Sorry. So the egg itself is populated, it's not in this diagram, but imagine little dots within it, which represent, in psychosynthesis terms, subpersonalities. Split off parts of ourself that have been constructed out of experiences and conditioning and all these other things that happen to us. And they could be mapped very closely onto some of the archetypes that we had up earlier on, like the lover, the rebel, the dreamer, the wounded child, the depressed one, all of these different things. And they populate the egg, so some of them might live in the higher unconscious, some of them might be way down in the basement, as it were, in the lower unconscious. And many of them may exist in kind of range of the middle. So in very crude terms, lower unconscious tends to represent the past, the middle unconscious tends to represent current affairs in our life, and the higher unconscious is very much future oriented. Yeah, so you find something like a dreamer probably up there, because it's constantly aspiring and dreaming.
What about dreams?
What about dreams?
Dreams.
Well, actually, the
that
things
diagram.
they wouldn't be on that diagram at this point. Yeah, this is kind of a description of before anything happens at this point. So a dream would be something entering into that picture, if that makes sense. Yeah? So, what else to say? So subpersonalities become the things that we get stuck to and identify with. So if I give you an example, maybe that'll help. So imagine I've got a subpersonality that's a real rebel. And it's come out of a whole bunch of experiences with bad authority figures, teachers that were always like this, whatever it is. And so I'm walking along, minding my own business, going about my day. I'm walking through a city street and suddenly there's a policeman who comes round the corner who's just right in front of me in his uniform. And that's all it takes. It's just that's enough to trigger some kind of reaction that sees my awareness, then jump down to a subpersonality. So subpersonalities pretend to be the I, you could say. It would be like a planet pretending to be the sun, like Jupiter suddenly. Actually, I'm the centre of the solar system, everybody over here, and then everything else going with it for a while, until the energy drops away. So you can imagine in a situation like that, it might not be very still. I might just be like, take this place in the mouth, but no reason at all, and things might ensue from there. Because it wasn't going through the I, there wasn't a choice, actually. It was a reactive, immediate kind of snap So the metaphor is that the sub-personalities are like the different musicians in an orchestra. Yeah, you've got some that play brass instruments, some that play violins, someone playing a piccolo, someone banging away on massive timpani. But they're all playing whatever the hell they like. They've got no agreement on what music they're playing. They're competing. Some of them might have given up playing altogether. They might go, oh, what's the point? No one will hear me in amongst this cacophony. And others might be really getting off on the power. I've got a trombone, I can really dominate everyone. So this is basically inner life for most average people, cacophonous yo-yoing between states. And what's missing, according to this understanding, is, of course, a conductor. And what does a conductor do? Well, a conductor doesn't really do very much, apparently. It doesn't play an instrument, doesn't contribute to the sound being made, but sort of stands and holds a point, principle of order, keeps time, importantly, but also will have kind of said, right, we are playing, and here's the piece we're playing, and everybody turns to that page, and it might be a negotiation, it might be, well, we'll start by playing this, and then we'll get on to Mozart, and then later we'll finish with some Bach, or whatever it is. So there's a kind of choice being operated. So the I stands as that kind of conductor play. A final thought on this. There's also this weird line going on by here. The thing at the top that's a bit like a star gets all sorts of different names. Self with a capital S is the usual one. Hard to say much about that other than you could replace it with the word soul. You could replace it with, well, you make up your own. But it's fundamentally that which informs the I. So in other words, wherever the I is, the self is too. They're usually drawn with a solid line. They're inseparably sort of linked. So in our metaphor of the orchestra, the thing at the top with a star on it would be two things. It would be the score with all the notes written on it. So that's one level of it. And it would also be the performance. It would be what it sounds like when an orchestra plays and makes this abstract thing called a score suddenly come to life in a way that can really get you, really powerfully move you to all kinds of different states. So that's probably the best riff I could do on that in this moment, knowing that there are a couple more slides to squeeze in before the time is up. I'm sure there are questions about this, but I'm going to ignore them for the moment. God, it's great being up here. So how does all that work? Well, there's a kind of engine, there's a process that's continually at work within that egg diagram, within our lives, and I'm suggesting very explicitly within therapy and certainly within drama therapy. And fundamentally, this dynamic is described as, in psychosynthesis terms, identification and disidentification. So it's a back and a forth. So identification is, I take on that subpersonality. I am possessed, as James Hillman might have said, by that archetype. I fall in love, and I'm just in love. There's nothing else going on in that moment. I am the plaything of Eros at that moment, and then that will change, and suddenly I'm in Hades, and I'm over here. So this is identification, and everybody participates in that. That's just a human deal, you see. But disidentification, that's a different matter. That's a learned thing. That's a skill that you have to cultivate, I would suggest. It's not an automatic thing. So what is disidentification? It sounds fairly obvious, but I'll try and explain it a little bit more clearly with a quote. So this is from the guy Almas again, who observes that many people think that disidentification is an activity. I see my identification and I do something to it, I disidentify. In the same way that I identify, I can disidentify. But this is not the case. Identification is an activity, and true disidentification is the absence of that activity. So it's about a cessation of something. It's not another doing, it's a cessation of doing, and that's radically countercultural in our time, in this place. When do you ever get the advice not to do anything at all? To stop doing anything? Just be. Very rarely, I would suggest. So just very, very simple observation on one level, but really profound, I would argue. So a bit like taking on a role, playing that role, and hopefully disidentifying from that role. That's an outer worldly expression of the same energy in action. And you know, sometimes people don't succeed at disidentifying. But don't take it off fully, think they have, but then find out later when they go home, you know, I'm still, right, I can't think of an example right now. Yeah? So, really, really critical bit for the workings of the psyche. Wow. I had something for this, but maybe the time has escaped us. I wanted to just say something about the place of the body in all of this work, in a very hurried way, I think. So most therapies clearly don't pay a great deal of attention to the body. I think that's a fair thing to say. If it's not, it's too late, I just said it. But many therapists are very comfortable sat in their chair and a minute, anyway, look, come on, let's get up and move, let's go for a walk, let's dance, let's do some drama therapy. It's terror. I've seen it many times. So there's that level of the body, but there's also many other levels of the way in which the body is what keeps us honest and keeps us present. Without a body, there isn't any time, there isn't any present, there isn't any now. If you think about it, your mind and your emotions are very frequently time travelling. You know, you're over there somewhere in your mind. You're thinking about your bus journey home later, or what's the traffic going to be like, or what am I having for tea, or why the hell did I agree to come to this workshop? What's going on about now? Or you're feeling something that happened yesterday or 10 years ago. Your body can't do that. Your body is right where it is. It just is. It's right here, right now, whether you like it or not. So, presence, you could say, is the act of letting those things coincide, of allowing mind, allowing the processes of thought and of emotion to gather in the body, to be properly, fully embodied. It's very, very, very rare for it to reach that level of presence. I think your golden thread playback stuff gets really close to that when I've seen that. You know, to be that spontaneously available to whatever gets thrown at you. There has to be a real grounded rootedness in the body. So maybe when we look and see that shortly, we can hold that thought in mind. Maybe that's what I'm watching right now, which is an act of embodiment being kind of displayed and shown. Because how do we learn it? Well, we have to learn it by being on the receiving end. We have to be shown. That's the deal. So there's a quote there from the flamenco guitarist Andres Segovia. That's not him, by the way. That's Picasso's blue guitar. But Segovia, who says, lean your body forward slightly to support the guitar against your chest, for the poetry of the music should resound in your heart. And of course the guitar is a very frequently used image for the body, particularly a woman's body, in lots of that culture. I was going to play you a short film, which I'm not going to do now, but I'll just tell you where it is. 6-minute long film, which if you want to have a look at it, because this is getting to the cultural level of everything we're speaking about. If you do want to check it out, you can find it on YouTube. It's just called what is it called? The Making of Human Beings. So again, back to indigenous understanding. Indigenous people the world over say something or articulate something like the fact that human beings are not born. Now, what gets born isn't yet a human being. That's the deal, that's the understanding. Human beings are made. That's an indigenous wisdom, you could say, an indigenous understanding on that level. How do they get made? By the cultures they're born into. That's what forms them into whatever kind of human they're going to be. Hence a whole series of understandings of initiation, of depth, of meaning, and of the transpersonal. A life that's bigger than my own little me life. So that's what the film kind of touches upon, making of meaning and the making of human beings, and intimately connected. And one way of understanding culture itself is that it's the thing, as a human being, you don't get born into, well, it feels like you get born into a whole set of existing standard issue meanings. That's one level. But actually what you're heir to as a human being is the mandate to make meaning. It's a very creative act to be fully human, one could say. So, yeah, I'll give you the address. It's you can get it at www.orphanwisdom.com. And if you look under, there's a little tab on there called Films. I think there are 3 or 4 films. The one that I was going to play you is called The Making of Human Beings. Well worth a look. So, I think we're nearly done. Why isn't that working? I'm going to end with a quote about story from Alan Garner, who I think, frankly, should be on the stamps in this country. Fantastic author, writer, novelist, thinker, deep dweller in mystery and landscape. A man who, when interviewed recently on Radio 4, they asked him, how do you write? What's your working method? And he said, well, I stay up very late, I stare at the fire, and 4 or 5 hours later there are loads of words on a page. I don't know how he gets there. I can't tell where I end and the landscape begins anymore. I've lived in it and with it so long. But he says, in terms of purpose, and particularly story, the purpose of the storyteller is to relate the truth in a manner that is simple, to integrate without reduction. For it is rarely possible to declare the truth as it is, because the universe presents itself as a mystery. We have to find parables, we have to tell stories to unriddle the world. So I think, in terms of an hour-long riff on this kind of stuff, that's about as good as we're going to get in terms of an approximation of what therapy could be, what storytelling could be, what living a more full human life could look like at a time and a place that, frankly, that often looks like it's gone completely mad in the most destructive of ways. Yeah, so I think that's it. Yes. Yes it is. I should shut up at that point. It is cool.